We're here today with Nathan ILtis, and we're here to discuss the climate change. Uh, and Nathan, can you tell me why I would ask you about this? What makes you a person I would come to talk about climate change and the how to understand it?
Well, I've just spent 2 years in a program at Stanford University studying this stuff, and so I feel that I've gained a good background knowledge on it and some pretty in-depth, detailed knowledge as well. Also, the state of California is obviously where that school is, and they're the most progressive state in the country, um, a leader in climate change around the world on the level of countries as well. So, at the same kind of level as some countries in Europe are. Germany, for instance, California's kind of up there with them in leading the push to stop climate change. And as we know, if California was a standalone country, it'd be the sixth largest country in the world, sixth largest economy. So
Well,
it's a
and
pretty important place.
it is, and what was your degree in?
It was called Atmosphere and Energy, and I think it should really be called Renewable Energy Engineering. It was an engineering degree,
It's an engineering degree.
master's.
And so what you actually do is study the exact effect that what's happening has on our world and how things are changing. So tell me, and with Hurricane Florence going on right now, this is everybody has their eyes open to what really is climate change. What is it that is changing what's making this happen, and how does the temperature of the earth have to do with this, or the temperature change?
Mm-hmm.
How is CO2 how is this happening?
Well, it happens due to the greenhouse effect, which we've been talking about for years so far, and it's widely proven, widely accepted. So really the question isn't really anymore what's happening, it's the fact that it is happening. CO2 is being emitted in the atmosphere from fossil fuels, from your car, from power plants. It's also coming from cows. Greenhouse gases are coming from methane, which is a greenhouse gas itself that's 200 times more powerful than CO2. And there are many sources of CO2 that people often don't think about. One major one is a lot of global warming and climate change is being driven by agriculture and food use, and that actually accounts for, it's estimated that land use and agriculture account for about a third of the CO2 emissions and methane emissions that are happening in the world today. So,
Well, let's get back to, okay, so there's a temperature change. So
mm-hmm.
what temperature, how much have you estimated that we have increased the temperature on this earth as human beings by CO2? How much have we actually increased the temperature? Is it estimated by these gases?
You're right. It seems like the temperature has risen to be about 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius over where it would be if humans had not emitted all these greenhouse gases.
Okay, so in essence, what we're saying here is really there's probably a timeline where it's a perfect environment for humans to exist. So we are essentially speeding up Earth's processes that would be happening anyway, but we're just shortening our ability to be able to sustain ourselves on Earth. Because if we get to what temperature will all these catastrophic things really be happening, as far as the flooding of the lands and everything that are happening, what temperature is that increased to? Like, if we get to what temperature, when are
Mm-hmm.
when are all those things really going to happen? Are they figured?
According to, there are kind of 11 different ways to measure our impact on the biosphere, and there's a few organizations that have tried to quantify this, but essentially we're at 2 degrees temperature rise right now, and people think that we've already surpassed a couple different carrying capacities of the biosphere. We've already made a lot of species extinct. We've made the oceans too acidic, but it's not irreversible. If we get to 3 degrees Celsius, then they think that that things will start to be irreversible, but it's unknown, and really we should be able to still survive after that. So it's definitely a worthy cause to pursue. It's not a lost cause. And the other thing I'll point out is that it is the natural cycle of the Earth to go through these warming and cooling cycles in the ice ages and the subsequent warm periods. But it usually happens on a much larger time scale, on the order of tens of thousands of years, and we've seen these temperature rises in the past 50 years. So humans really just started burning fossil fuels 100 years ago, and on a large scale, and we can correlate the temperature rise to that.
Okay, so what you're saying is that that if we can just slow this down and stop using fossil fuels and go to more renewable energy sources, then we're actually, in essence, extending the period of time that we can be on Earth. So we're extending it for our grandkids and everybody so that they'll get to enjoy it. So tell us a little bit about Montana, if you can, and what we use here in Montana and how we could get this rolling.
Well, here in Montana, we actually it turns out that we're using a lot of hydroelectric power, which we're importing from, we have some large rivers in the state, but we're also importing a lot of hydroelectric from the Pacific Northwest, which actually runs almost entirely, their grid power comes almost entirely from hydroelectric and rivers, which is obviously a clean source of energy. However, it has some environmental impacts that make it that take it out of the category of renewable energy, because there's a limit to it's not 100% renewable. It's causing damage to rivers and ecosystems. What is renewable is wind and solar. So getting back to Montana's mix, we run on about a little less than 2/3 hydroelectric power, and then 1/3 coal. This is just our electricity grid. Everybody is obviously driving gasoline vehicles as well, and that's a huge source of emissions. But we're running on 1/3 coal still, and all of this hydroelectric. And the best thing that we could do would be to first eliminate the coal power, because it's not clean. The hydropower is, and then slowly move away from the hydropower towards more wind and solar. And Montana is actually in a region with an amazingly large wind resource. We have eastern Montana is just a giant plains of very high winds. It's one of the best. The central plains of the U.S. Is one of the best places in the world to harvest wind energy. So we could definitely do that. And then on an individual scale, there aren't that many people in Montana anyway, and the best thing that you can do for yourself and for everybody else to kind of spread the word is to put solar panels on your roof. There are cost-effective ways to do it these days. They've gotten to the point where installing solar panels is cheaper over time than just paying for your electricity. So you'll be saving money as soon as you install them, even in a climate where it's cold like this. And then there are other measures such as energy efficiency. Installing LED light bulbs is a very easy one that anybody can do, that we can all do to help the climate and actually save ourselves money and make our lives better. We'll be breathing, less. There'll be less fossil fuels in our local atmosphere, and then also as LEDs they're tunable to make. They can produce better light, so they can reduce seasonal affective disorder for people in the winter. They're cheaper, so and then there are other measures that you can do to just increase comfort in your home. That it's kind of a common misperception that people need to sacrifice something to reduce their energy use. They don't. They can just reduce it there, and still be as comfortable, if not more comfortable. For example, if you build a house with a lot of insulation and really, really well insulated windows, you'll not only save energy, but you'll be more comfortable sitting next to your windows in the winter because they won't feel as cold. Essentially, with thin single pane windows, they're sucking up some of your heat when you're near them because heat isn't just transferred through conduction, it's transferred through radiation as well. So they're essentially radiating cold to you if they're too thin and not strong. And I think we've all kind of experienced that drafty feeling when we're next to a single pane window. So there are a lot of great ways to manage it.
All right, and getting back to the solar panels, how does that work? Mm-hmm. How do solar panels work? So it feeds into the grid. So instead of like using coal, it feeds into the power plant. How does that happen?
Well, the power plants are far away from us, and then the electricity is transmitted via the power lines. And the thing about coal is that when you burn fossil fuels, you're essentially getting a 30 or 40% efficiency, so you're really wasting about 60% of that energy from the coal as heat. And the great thing about the sun is that it's an endless, renewable, clean resource. And so when you put solar panels on your roof, you're skipping, first of all, there are also losses associated with moving electricity from the coal power plant to your home, and a lot of costs and ugly power poles and so forth. Whereas if you just install solar panels on your roof, you're getting the electricity directly supplied to your home. It's clean. There are no energy losses, as long as you understand that the sun is basically an endless energy source for us. And the other great thing about it is that in Montana we have net energy metering, which is the case in a lot of states. So basically if you overproduce, then you can sell back the energy to the grid. Right.
Well, that's the thing that I just am a little concerned about is, are we moving fast enough? Do you think there's a lag between California and the rest of the country? Mm-hmm. Well, I personally do. And so that's why I asked Nathan to speak, because I was greatly encouraged by going to California and seeing progress, whereas in some parts of the country, it seems that there's some sort of fear and denial that it actually exists, and I think that it's like anything. If you wait to find out what would happen if you didn't do it, then you just don't always want to be saying, "I wish we did that." So I think that that we don't want to get this temperature up to 3 degrees, and which would be like what would happen if we increase the Earth's temperature by 3 degrees.
Mm-hmm. We'd start seeing more extreme storms, worse than we've already seen.
More extremes.
And then we would see it's a very high number, something like, I don't know, in the range of 20 to 30% of the world's population would be underwater.
Right. So this is a very serious situation, and not one that we can stick our heads in the sand about. And I think we ought to get moving on this. And I think that the best thing we can all do is reach out to everyone and help educate ourselves. And as I heard, I guess the CEO of Exxon said, he said, this is an engineering problem and there's engineering answers. And so I am greatly encouraged by young people like Nathan, who are making moves to make this a place where we can live and breathe clean air and clean water. And that's really what is the essence of human life on Earth and all the biospheres that go along with it. And as I also heard a quote that says, if you think the economy is more important than the environment, then try counting your money while you hold your breath. And with that note, thank you very much, Nathan, and let's get going.
Thank you, Sharon.